First of all, we just had this sort of overarching conversation about GDPR. So I'd like to ask, sort of a lot of talk about consent. What does that actually mean? How can an organisation actually communicate consent without sort of having huge, long legal documents and tick boxes? So, Ian, maybe you could start us off with that.
Oh, bloody hell. Well, so, I mean, the main part of our business has been about providing technology out that's hopefully going to be out in these machines that people are building that are secure. And, you know, back to the earlier points about people are going to need to trust that this data is actually going to be managed and be secure from hacks and things like that. That's pretty much where we are. In terms of your question, we don't ever gather financial data from customers. People don't spend money directly with us. We're not sort of like a consumer brand. But we're passionate about ecosystems. You know, Armor's got it where it's been because we don't make chips or platforms, but we have a vibrant ecosystem, and they partner with us on various platforms. Our documents have always been about 600 pages as opposed to 25 words. I think we're probably one of the ostriches that were discussed. I think partly because we aren't the consumer brand. I think we are, honestly, a little bit behind. So I'm probably a bit rubbish at answering that question. Well, our job is our first job is trying to help people build platforms that are going to be, you know, generating data. And, you know, that's our main focus of working out how they're going to make sure those machines are as unhackable as possible.
Well, we can come back to you on some of that area. So what about you, Michaela? Because you've got a digital capital, you've got quite a broad view of what organisations are doing.
Yeah.
What's the best way?
You talk a bit about digital catapult. We are not a very big and complex organization, so we don't deal with many data, but we want to identify a roadmap for others that have this kind of issue, how to manage this kind of practices. So we start from the consent, how to gather consent for our services, and we learn quite a lot in this journey. So we know there is need for making this clear. So GDPR will require for consent to be, when you need consent for gathering data, to be unambiguous and informed. So we try to identify the simplest way for doing this, and we realize that there is the need for some kind of standardized way. So we are aware, and we are working with the initiative happening in US and now starting also in EU about consent receipt. But we also understand that before consent, you need to somehow talk to people and to your customer, your end user, what is happening with their data. So this requirement also for information notice in the GDPR. And through this journey, we realized that this is not something that technician or legal expert can solve. It requires quite a very different set of skills. So we start to take the approach of the user experience, understanding with people, talking to people what kind of information they like to see when they give consent, how their data are stored, how data are collected, for how long, what is the purpose, and actually talking about privacy 2.0. They need to understand also very clear what is the benefit of giving the data. It's not just a freemium service that I can access. So there is more behind this. Can I do more with my data? You getting control, getting access of my data. So we try to combine all this information in what we call the personal data receipt, which is something that is the very first point that the user sees before joining a service. And having this in a way that is easy to understand, meaningful, and perhaps using icons. We are doing also work in trying to understand what are the best practices for icons or these kind of things. So this is the first way you should try to engage with the user, with the individual, in gathering consent for something that is informed and meaningful for them. So yeah, and there is no one solution fits all, but I think talking to people, I try to understand and also identify the different demographics of your service and the different background or this kind of things, cultural background. It's something that helps you to give an informed consent. It's something that you should care about. That's the first step. Then there will be more coming with standardized procedure that makes this scalable, but something that makes it all clear. So.
And Gurv, obviously the browser companies are at the forefront really of a lot of the argument around, you know, what happens with data. So what's your kind of policy on how you communicate what you're going to do with the data and how you communicate ideas around consent?
Well, we actually collect very little data, relatively speaking, about our users, and that's intentional. So Mozilla has got a set of things it calls our lean data principles, which we try and abide by, and which we encourage others to abide by, which say that you should collect the minimum amount of data that you possibly need, that you should make sure it's secure when at rest, and that you should involve users in a conversation about what that data is and why you have it and why it makes life better for them. And I think the heart of consent is the value proposition, because there are two sorts of consent. There's grudging consent and there's joyful consent, right? We've all had that experience where we're signing up for some new website or service and we fill in the form and there's a checkbox at the bottom which says, we are going to sell your data and your firstborn child to da-da-da-da-da. And then there's the button at the bottom which says submit or sign up, and it's grayed out, right? And you look at the checkbox and you know that when you check the checkbox, it's going to light up the button. And you want the button to light up, but you don't want to check the checkbox. That's grudging consent, right? Where you know that something's going to happen that you don't really like, but there's this possible service that you might like, and you're weighing it up. On the other hand, I go to the company we use for travel agency, and it says, do you want notification when your flight is delayed? Put your mobile phone number in here. And I'm like, yes, I want to give you my mobile phone number. My mobile phone number is just what you need right now. Let me type it. In fact, can the browser pre-fill it for me so you can get it just that bit faster? So
but then I suppose the problem is that phone number comes in useful for that function.
Well,
but then
yes.
what if they
So there's
sell it to
joyful
someone
consent
else?
and there's grudging consent. And I think those are two ends of the spectrum that I described. But I think businesses will succeed if they can persuade their users to joyfully consent to their data practices. And that is all about helping the user understand the value proposition of what you're doing with the data, and, to be honest, not doing things with the data that the user wouldn't like if they found out about them.
I mean, that comes to the crux of everything we're talking about today, which is that we want consumers to give their data up so that we can do more useful things and they can have more useful services. We don't want them withdrawing. But in a way, Alan, what you're offering is a way, in the previous panel we heard about going dark, it's kind of what you're doing. So what's your stance on giving people control of their data versus removing it completely from companies to use?
Wire is private messenger and the platform that in a first phase it is focusing on consumer. In a phase that we are starting now, we are focusing on a business's Internet of Things and automotive. It has been built by people that built Skype. So Janos Friis is also one of the founders and has a pretty bold vision. And our vision is to give back people privacy for their communications. And when we were starting Wire, we wanted to build it as a Skype, what Skype would be 2-3 years ago when we started it. So if we were building Skype 2-3 years ago, we looked at what are the things that are most important and what's wrong with the market today. And privacy was the first thing that came there. Similarly, as with Mozilla, we try to get as few as possible private information as that is enough to run our service. We want to get quite a bit of information about how service is used. And I would claim here that 95% of information what we are getting and what other companies are getting can be given on an anonymized basis and still be super useful for a company. There is very, very few information that we are every day submitting that needs to be attached with our mobile number, with our IP address, and with our name. Service can be made as useful and as good by stripping off 95% of that information, and I got quite concerned when I hear that innovation is based upon that, on passing all of my personal data from one service to another service without my specific consent for it. And I believe there that you're going to see a big shift there with millennials and with other youngers that are coming that, as also was told on a previous panel, that they're going to be questioning more what's happening with your information. And I see with our user base, it's growing dramatically, reverse proportionally to size of our terms of use and privacy policy. Terms of use needs to be written for us, not by lawyers for lawyers. It needs to be written for people that consume it, that understand it.
But can you give me an example of this kind of anonymized data use that Wire would use? So something that improves your business, that uses, that looks at data patterns but doesn't associate data with individuals. Can you give us an example?
Exactly. So it is, for instance, for us, it's interesting to see where people are calling more, and we see, for instance, that people in Europe call significantly less than people in Middle East, North Africa region. In Germany, that they are primarily texting, that also they like those timed messages or disposable messages that are going away. And then we know with the markets what works well, and we know what is better to target with a message in order to get a larger subscriber base, and also to make that service better suited for our users.
And you mentioned about millennials being more privacy conscious. I mean, I think a lot of people might think they're probably less privacy conscious, that they don't care, because they've grown up with this model of giving away data in return for free stuff.
Exactly. So this is where it started. Now a number of them are being burned with it, and those are also ones that are now getting aware that as they are getting new jobs, that their employers have quite a bit of a data that can be provided by Facebooks and similar about their private lives, and as they are getting more aware of it, and as this awareness is rising, also the change in behavior is rising. And I dare to compare that current awareness about all of hazards that can happen due to misuse of privacy are similar to hazards of passive smoking, and awareness towards passive smoking 30 years something ago when I was a kid.
So Ian, obviously ARM will be hoping that the Internet of Things explodes, and that we have the billions of connected devices that the analysts are promising us.
Yeah.
What are the implications for personal privacy, where we're living in a world of connected devices that are possibly tracking us, sometimes with and without our consent?
Yeah, I mean, it's yeah, I mean, there's the tracking, and then obviously there's the hacking, right? So I think we've been used to providing technology to customers and then being really in control of their worlds. They've been somewhat closed systems, and obviously as these things open up, it's massively more challenging. So what are we doing? So we don't make chips. We provide technology, and what we say is that I say the good thing about ARM technology is you can do anything with it. The bad thing is you can put it together in all sorts of different and bad ways. So we're having to be more prescriptive of how people build platforms. We're having to do a whole ton of education, because there's great hooks inside the hardware. We're a believer that really for robust systems, you're going to have a combination of hardware technology and software. But there's great stuff out there that people just don't even know how to switch it on, because I think the analysis of making consent simplified, security and all this sort of stuff in technology is incredibly complicated. And people aren't even switching. If you look at simple things like wireless access points, people aren't even switching on security and things like that. So we're getting through education phases, and we're actually bringing in bringing in sort of hackers for good kind of thing to actually go off and robustly whack on our systems. And I think we're going to have to look at layering up systems of security, but also then looking at making sure that depending on the value of the data, you're going to take different approaches to how you build those platforms. Long-winded way of saying I think we're going to have to be more prescriptive with how our technology is used, and actually continue to make sure there's systems that can go back to fail-safes and restart from a very secure platform.
What about you, Gurv? Is Mozilla as an organisation thinking about this new generation of connected devices? And
Very much so. Mozilla, as some of you will know, had a brave go at breaking the hegemony of the two mobile device operating system market. And learning from our experience there, we're now trying to make sure that the Internet of Things doesn't end up as a single supplier and as balkanized as the mobile market has. Yes, absolutely.
And what are your thoughts on protecting privacy in that environment? How far have you got with considering the implications of that?
I think that particularly in the IoT space, privacy and security are extremely closely connected, because if your personal home network is not secure, then there's no way that you can guarantee the privacy of your data. I mean, when you start shipping your data off to other people for processing, that's a separate thing. But the fundamental baseline that you've got to have is you've got to have a secure home network. And the economics of that are unfortunately not good, because the incentives are very, very misaligned. An IoT device is a cheap device, and once someone sold it to you, they've sold it to you. They have zero economic incentive to provide security updates or to continue working on that product, because they want to work on newer and better products. It then sits on your network, and if it's internet exposed, within time some flaw will be discovered, and then that device ends up disrupting everybody else's day. Not necessarily yours so much, but certainly everybody else's. So there's also the kind of the pollution, shared cost aspect to bad Internet of Things devices. And trying to figure out how to arrange that ecosystem or drive that ecosystem to a way where incentives are more aligned, or to construct it technically in a way where it doesn't matter so much, is a really difficult space, and something I've personally been thinking hard about, even though I'm not in that group. I think it would be awesome if the standard architecture of the Internet of Things had devices on your home network not able to communicate directly with the internet, so that they couldn't be attacked. And if they were compromised, they couldn't send out either your personal information or just spam packets to denial of service. If there were a mediator in between your devices, maybe something that you paid a subscription for that was regularly updated, your home hub or whatever it was, that was able to control those things, to shut down traffic flows it didn't like, and all of that managed by a service provider who has your interest and the interest of your network and the interest of the internet at the center of what they're doing. I think that trying to get every IoT device to be secure for the lifetime of the device is impossible. I think we have to architect the system so that it's not necessary.
And
And
Alan,
I think your point about the recent, or was it 4 or 5 weeks ago, where there's digital video recorders on the East Coast, which had a sort of an admin username password that went and hit DNS servers on the East Coast, brought down Spotify and Twitter and Netflix. Actually, one of the upsides was that whole people at work on the East Coast probably did more work that day as opposed to watching their films. But the scary thing was that
Depends where your work is.
yeah, the scary thing is that those DVRs were behaving perfectly normally, right? They were still acting like just regular DVRs, and to your point, they had been hacked and were just pushing a whole load of data. And I think in our industry, historically, people have just focused on making chips really, really cheap, and back to that sort of connected thing, when it was just a chip in a box, they just focused on building some great technology in a component. That was the end of their responsibilities.
Well, the expression is cheap as chips for a reason.
Yes, yeah, and it's bringing in new skill. I think our industry is going through a whole load of mature consolidation. People are being focused on just eking out any intelligence just to do the job. And fundamentally, security is hard. It takes up power. It takes up CPU cycles. It's complicated stuff. And I think unfortunately, it's going to take some of these use cases like the one on the East Coast for people to realize that this stuff. People are going to have to rethink, their value proposition. They can't just sell and just really focus on getting a cheap chip out, which was the case on that one.
Issue you raise is another reason why centralization on your home network of security might be a good idea, because people are going to want to sell the thermometer, the programmable plug, the light bulb as cheap as possible. if they all have to have the security, the update system, all of that built in, they're going to be more expensive and they're going to lose in the marketplace to things that don't have the security. And the economics of that just don't work. If instead the architecture is that none of these devices communicate directly with the internet and it's all mediated, then it's safe, or safer at least, for those devices to be buy once and forget, which benefits the consumer and benefits the manufacturer.
So, Alan, how are you planning to help these companies? Because I know it's part of the rollout of your platform.
So where we are more currently present is in some that at this point of time cannot be disclosed, discussions and partnerships in the automotive industry, where things are very similar but not the same. So it's, for instance, with the cars, you've seen that Ford has been hacked. Tesla, that has been considered as super safe, was hacked just a couple of weeks ago. And the fundamental issue there is with the current cloud communication model. And that is because communication from one side, either a factory or our mobile phone or a tablet to car, is not end-to-end encrypted. It is encrypted on a hop-by-hop basis, and once when it comes into a cloud, then it gets decrypted. Data could be data mined, it could be searched, or whatever else we are doing with a current cloud. But this is something going forward that is not going to work. So communication with the car is going to need to be end-to-end encrypted. Otherwise, there's always going to be a chance that there is a man in the middle that acts as a cloud, and then when we are driving our Tesla at 80 miles per hour, we got a message to empty our bank account in the next 60 seconds, otherwise car is going to go to 180 miles per hour. Those are the cases that we have already today in hundreds of thousands cases with the people's laptops being locked, where they need to pay some ransomware to get it unlocked. Similar things on a way bigger scale and on a way more scary scenarios can happen with the cars unless we start changing some of the fundamental technologies that are used there. So similarly, as it was discussed with Internet of Things, there we see again what is similar as in this case is that cloud model is going to be changing. It needs to shift compared to this where we are today. And also I dare to say that, as it was called on a previous panel, like information that we have about our users being the oil of the industry, see it other way around. I see it as a radioactive waste. And when it's not used, it's just waste. And most of that customer data that sits at the telecom players, been working quite a lot with the telecom players, been working a lot with the service providers, and I've started a telecom provider and service provider that is in Norway now, 500 people, a fairly large and nice business. Most of the data that is there collected from the users is not used. It's just waiting there to be exploited and for damage to be done.
So,
So one of the reasons Mozilla is keen on evangelizing lean data is that data can be a liability as well as an asset. I'm not wanting to scare anyone, but if you've got data lying around that's personal data and it gets stolen, you're in much more trouble than if you don't have the data to steal in the first place. There was a recent, the US government subpoenaed a communications provider called Signal for all of the data they had about a particular person. And they said, well, he created his account on this date, and he last logged in on that date. That's it. That's all we got, right? If you don't have the data, it can't be stolen from you, and it can't be taken to the detriment of your customers. So that's another reason lean data is a good idea. It's cheaper too.
Okay, well, it's quite a short session, but we don't want to stop you from getting coffee when you need to get coffee. So I'm going to call on our next three speakers. They're going to be three short presentations and then some very quick questions at the end. But before they come to the stage, I'd like to thank the four gentlemen here, and please show them your appreciation. Thank you.